Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our podcast series on the category of ancient wisdom demystified. Today's topic is the evolution of God, period 4, Monotheism, part 1, Judaism. Did monotheism suddenly take over polytheism concepts?
No, Joel. Monotheistic concept evolved over fairly a long period of time. Let us examine what drove the transition from polytheism to monotheism. I remember in the past episodes we have been doing on polytheism in the Sumerian Akkadian culture, so where they had many gods, and that's how you started basically moving from nature worship into a polytheistic God who's in an instituted organization or a culture. It was Babylonian king Hammurabi, 1810 to 1750 BCE, who made Marduk. You remember Marduk? We talked about Marduk some time back. He made him the primary god. The other gods were all demoted. So, for example, Adad was the god of rain, and he was renamed Marduk of rain. So similarly, he renamed every god with a primary name of Marduk and the subtitle or the surname of the function, like, god of thunder, god of, agriculture, all that became Marduk. So that's how we started having a slightly more shift towards monotheistic concept. It was the reign of Assyrian King Sargon II, 722 to 705 BCE in Babylon, who was really open-minded. And it was his open-mindedness and leniency towards religious worship that also started moving people from a polytheistic concept to a monotheistic concept. You should see the sequence of the dates, the years. So now we have Nebuchadnezzar II, 597 BCE, raided Jerusalem, which was part of the Palestinian kingdom. We'll talk about it a little later. And he besieged the capital city. And to avoid destruction of the temple which Solomon had built, King Joachim of Judah, in his third year, changed his allegiance from Egypt to Babylon, because Egypt was primarily occupying or ruling over the entire Palestinian region at that time. It was the Babylonian king, Cyrus, between 559 and 530 BC, who was very, very tolerant towards all religions in all the kingdoms he conquered. He conquered Persia, Media, Lydia, and Babylon. He was practically, the entire region was ruled by Cyrus. And Cyrus was a person who was very, very absolutely lenient towards whatever religion these people practice in that region, let them continue. In fact, prior to that, Nebuchadnezzar captured all the top cream of the Jewish community, all the Levites, Pharisees, and all these people, and brought them to Babylon. He left only the women folk in Jerusalem after the siege. So King Cyrus was the one who sort of allowed these people to go back and start again worshipping their God in Jerusalem. Also, at this point, another important thing happened. Babylonian astronomers, who were very, very advanced in their thinking, started a scientific rationalism age by predicting the eclipse, because so far, eclipse was in the domain of the gods. Whenever God wanted, there used to be an eclipse, and people used to pray that the eclipse should go away so that they can get the full light of the sun or the moon. Now, this intervention was thrown out of the window because Babylonian astronomers predicted when the next eclipse will take place. So God was sort of bypassed. Yeah, that's how you slowly found that it was moving to monotheism in the whole region. Yeah.
Nice. So, Tata, how did monotheism establish itself in the Israelite society?
Yeah, it's a bit of a history now. Let's go through it one by one. You have to refer to the Old Testament as well as the Hebrew Bible. From literary analysis of two books, basically, one named Sefer Yetzirah, the other one is called Zohar. Sefer Yetzirah means book of creation. Zohar means book of enlightenment. Both were supposed to be written by Abraham. And you remember the story of Abraham in the Old Testament. His father was an idol maker, polytheistic in approach, as he was in the city of Ur in Sumer. And he moved to Canaan, and he heard the voice of God within himself, and then he moved to Canaan. Canaan was more towards the west, which is now actually the current day Palestine. So from Babylonian area, he moved to the Palestine area. And there he started establishing his family and all the relation who came along with him. He was a very wealthy man, so he was able to survive. And through his progeny, he was able to more or less establish a monotheistic religion there. But they were all primarily called Canaanites at that time. In the 12th century BCE, the economy of the Mediterranean collapsed. We'll see about it in another episode when we talk about Moses. And because of that, the children of Jacob, the grandchildren and all that who came out of Egypt, who had settled in Palestine, were basically rearing sheep. And they had to move because the region was very unstable. They moved to agriculture near the river Jordan. And the Canaanite society being polytheistic, the children of Israel, Abraham's grandchildren, great-grandchildren and all that, they also adopted a polytheistic approach apart from the monotheistic approach. This is why they started worshipping a god called Baal. So the United Kingdom of Israel was between 1047 BCE and 930 BCE. That was when Saul, David, Solomon, all of them ruled. One kingdom, one large kingdom of the entire Palestine. Then when Solomon died, his son was challenged by the other tribes. So what happened? There were 12 tribes of Israel. So other tribes challenged the line of David. And this resulted in division of the kingdom into two, north and south. After the 930 BCE, the establishment of the two kingdoms took place. 10 northern kingdoms were known as the kingdom of Israel. And the southern kingdom was known as the kingdom of Judah. This is how they divided the two regions. After the conquest of Israel by Babylonians, which you saw earlier, the Solomon temple in 587 BC was totally destroyed. It was Persian king Cyrus, as we saw also. In 539 BCE, he restored the worship of the temple and worship of Yahweh. This is how, again, they slowly moved from. So there was no completely one particular concept of a monotheistic God of Yahweh. Yahweh was preceded by El, the Elohim. And then subsequently, they also had a polytheistic worship of Baal. So it was a mix of all these things which was there. It was much, much later that the Jewish people started worshipping one God, Yahweh. Yeah.
Wow. That's quite an intense history, Tata.
Yeah.
So what happened after the reconstruction of the Solomon Temple in Jerusalem?
Yeah, that's a nice question. The second temple of Jerusalem was built around 515 BCE. This is after all the elite people came back from Babylon. Cyrus, the king, allowed them to go back to their own culture. So the kingdom of Israel, which also suffered a lot of occupation. In fact, the second temple period, after its construction, till 70s AD, went through 5 different types of invasion. The Persian rule was there. Then you had the Greek or the Hellenistic rule. Then the Hasmonean dynasty. Then you had the Herodian dynasty. The Herodian dynasty was much more closely aligned with Rome. And finally, Rome took over because there was a lot of revolt and all that. Rome fully took over, appointed a governor. You remember in the Bible, Pontius Pilate was actually appointed by, but Herod was actually a dummy king there. So he was there as a dummy king. When the Roman rule lasted for quite some time there. Under the Roman permission, the destroyed temple was rebuilt by King Herod and refurbished. The temple was
Mm.
totally restored at that time and worship started. But it didn't last for a very long time because in 74 AD, after the persecution and death of Christ, in 74 AD, there was a revolt of the Jews against the Romans. They were called the Zealots. And the Romans said, we will teach them a lesson. And he completely destroyed the temple, not one stone remaining on another. So
Yeah.
that's how it happened. So it was a history that really took place. And that is what happened in the whole process of time. Invasion after invasion and genocides, they were able to withstand. Yeah.
So, Tata, the Hebrewic monotheism is the longest lasting religion, like
Yeah.
lasting roughly from 3500 BC to today.
Yeah.
What is the reason for its longevity, despite all these genocides, the destruction of the temple, and everything?
Yeah. Basically, I would categorize from my own understanding 5 different reasons. One was the law of Moses, which was very strongly entrenched in the society. Right from the time the Israelite came out of Egypt into Sinai and then into Palestine, the Mosaic law was very fundamental to their morality. Ritualistic rigor and observance was also a part of the Jewish religion. And then the Hebrew language, it is the greatest language, one of the greatest language. If you really study Hebrew, you find that there is a deep meaning behind every alphabet, every word, and everything that is told in the Hebraic tradition. And that's why the Torah, which was written basically by Moses, the 5 books, were really rich in understanding of the nature of man and spirituality. Also, the mystical tradition was encouraged at that time. Kabbalah was encouraged at that time. And we had very great Jewish mystics who lived in the time, especially between 500 BC to the time of Christ. Also, the group itself, because of their discipline and all that, had extremely high acumen and they were able to be very good traders. That's why, though the diaspora of the Jews spread to a lot of region around Palestine, they were able to survive because their wealth increased quite a lot. Moses and his group of followers played a very important role in establishing monotheism and Yahweh as the only God of Israel. We will do a separate, because it's a very long story, we will do a separate episode on that one. Today we will just leave it at this one. And the use of Code of Hammurabi, in fact, Moses didn't get the 10 commandments from Sinai by God coming and giving him the laws. In fact, he copied very key tenets from the Code of Hammurabi as a model for the 10 commandments. You remember I told about Hammurabi?
Yeah.
He lived almost 500 years before Moses, but he was the first man to give law. And so that particular thing was actually copied because Moses was a very clever man. We'll talk about it later on. Yeah, that's a reason. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, Tata, can we assume that Christianity is actually an offshoot of Judaism?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. It was Yeshua ben Yosef, or Jesus in English, was a person who really didn't like the way the Jews were practicing their religion. It became a very ritualistic, rule-based religion. Didn't understand or didn't touch the spirituality of the individual. So he was the one who was the primary reason why he wanted to separate out and really go for a religion or a spiritual tradition which will be more individually oriented, not institutionalized. Christ didn't want, all that which are written much later has got no nothing to do with what Christ wanted. Christ wanted to have an individual spirituality which could empower people to reach the higher dimension of their thinking and consciousness. That's why he showed it by example, by his ways. So this is the reason why we can think, of course, because Jesus was a Jew and he quoted, from the Torah quite often in the synagogue, all that. Ultimately, you find that Jesus' teachings were promoted by other people. We will see about it when we talk about Christianity.
Okay.
So we will do a separate episode on Moses and monotheism next episode. And then we will
Yes.
examine the birth and spread of Christianity in the forthcoming episodes. Yeah, it has been a very good chat. And thank you very much for participating. And I think people are liking this particular mode of our, dialogue. Let us continue to do this one.
Hmm.
Thank you.
Let's
And
do it.
bye,
Thank
everybody.
you.
And we will see you in the next episode.